Good morning. You are watching Focus on Parliament on Civic Space TV, brought to you by the Center for Constitutional Governance. I am Isaac Kwagala, your host. Abducted in the Kenyan capital of Nairobi, alongside his colleague Haj Obedi Kamlegeya, spirited back to Kampala and eventually arraigned before the military court-martial. Dr. Besigye faces a fresh new wave of political tribulations. Well, on today's edition of Focus on Parliament, we discuss the critical role of the Parliament in the territorial protection of our country's sovereignty and integrity. I am now joined by a panel of distinguished personalities whom I have the honor and the pleasure to introduce to you, our esteemed viewers, who are in studio with me here today to help us dissect today's topic. Let me begin from my far left is the Honorable Paul Mwilu, a former legislator in the National Assembly. Honorable, you're most welcome to the program. Say hello to the viewers.
Thank you, viewers, and I'm delighted to be here once again.
Thank you, Honorable. Next to Honorable is Dr. Tolit Charles Atia, who is a researcher and a political economist. You're most welcome to the program, Doctor. Say hello to the viewers.
Thank you, and it's a pleasure to be here today.
Many thanks indeed. Last but not least is Professor Mwambusa Ndebesa, who is a mainstay on the program. Professor is a distinguished historian and a political commentator. Professor, say hello to the viewers. You're most welcome to the program.
Thank you. Good morning to the viewers and listeners. And I'm glad to be here to share issues of national importance in the nation building.
Thank you, Prof, for joining us. Honorable, let me start with you. This being largely a political and legal issue, it is still shrouded in a cloud of mystery. The incident involving the abduction of Dr. Besigye and his colleague Haj Obedi Kamlegeya in the Kenyan capital of Nairobi. What we know so far is that he was hastily whisked back into Uganda and arraigned before the military court-martial in Machindi. But help us to make an assessment. Is this an issue of two erstwhile fraternal countries now transforming into partners in crime? What could be underlying this incident?
Well, first, my first comment will go to, I think it is a big challenge to the implementation of international law and the Bill of Rights. Because as you know, that rights are accrued to us by virtue of being born. Once you are born with your right. And one of them is freedom of expression, freedom of movement. When you look at these rights, we have the international covenants, like on civil, economic, and political rights, the international covenant in social and cultural rights. They exist. These covenants, they normally say they are universal. They are close to you wherever you are. You understand. And this has come in the Bill of Rights, which we have domesticated into our municipal law, our constitution, and then other statutes. What is very challenging, why we need to interrogate the meaning of this, whether we need to make our own right, is that the power that be in most of these countries, they don't respect these rights. For instance, Dr. Besigye has a right to movement. He went by air. He was screened at the airport, because I've been at the airport, even when you have an official passport, or even when you dig into it, they search everybody as you enter. Then he entered the foreign country, where there's also the situated detail there. I think to me, what even is very intriguing is that while you're in a foreign country, the law provides for how do you extradite any person from a foreign country who has left your country. There is a procedure. They don't follow the procedure. They come to your hotel, they pick someone, and today you're focusing on Dr. Besigye, but it started with the FDC 37. It was very abnormal. But you know, Ugandan is in their survival mode. They let it pass and looked it is okay. And when President Museveni realized that actually can do that, he went and picked Dr. Besigye. That's first. You see, the integrity now of the borders, that someone can just walk in and pick you as if you are from, you annexed in a different country. It gives credence to, you know, when I was in Kenya, the Kenyans were complaining that it is President Museveni leading Kenya. He made sure to do the manipulations, he created a leader for them. He has made up with Rwanda. I mean that actually he is not safe now for anybody to do. But even then, what's wrong with meeting someone? Like I'll give an example. When we were in Dubai, they told us Dr. Chinji was in Dubai. They said he wanted to meet us as members of parliament. People said, no, I can't meet him. So for me, I went and met him as a Ugandan. He told me his story and how he wanted things to run. I told him, no, for me, I don't believe in what you want to do. For one reason, that you have no capacity to implement it. You understand? There are the processes where they are players. When you support the players who are in the field, then at the end of the day, you see how you end. But you also want to do your own thing. So did I commit an offense? Because I met him as a Ugandan. I listened to his story. I told him, I don't buy into your story. My story, because I told him that the problem we have in Uganda, whoever goes to the bush and it takes power, it was actually a sense of entitlement. That's a more of a bigger problem than even actually the taking power itself. And two, I have no guarantee that when you take that direction and you take power, you will be different from all others you have seen. I say, these processes are there. Can we deal with them the way they are? But what is very challenging in my view, Dr. Besigye kept on talking about the defiance, and of late, our president of the Uganda Law Society, Mr. Semakade, has been talking about banging the table. Because now government is committing illegalities. And to the people it is okay. What are you doing? You want to go to their system. They have taken you to a court martial. You're a retired officer, the other one is a civilian. We are saying the Constitutional Court has pronounced itself about that position. You cannot try civilians in the court martial. They misinterpret the law and then they put people there. So at the end of the day, in my view, this type of, we need to move away from, yes, we can express views, but you must also organize the wananchi to push back these excesses and the illegalities. Because you see, when you read our constitution in the chapter on human rights, it creates an obligation on the state, all organs of the state, to ensure that there's enjoyment of these rights. But it's the leading violator of these rights. Then the question is, what remains for us? You understand? And I think we need to, in my view, I want to implore the population to do more than just talking. We get out as a country, because this is not a Besigye thing. Tomorrow, for like Prof has been making comments, political comments, and I don't think that has gone well with government. Tomorrow they will pick him from, and I say, this professor now, he has been picked, they got to charge him. You understand? But I was also seeing that actually, to me, this is a precursor to great teacher Honorable Chagulanyi. Because you see that when you look at the charges in the court martial, they're talking of other meetings somewhere where nobody was. That you see, he was in the other country. Because now, the foundation which has been built, that they can pick you from wherever you have gone, and then they charge you, and they say, while you are there, you try to look for finance to come and support the overthrow of government. But even in criminal law, there is what we call the actus reus and mens rea. You understand? The mens rea, it is the blameworthy state of mind. If someone has gone to launch a book, normally as a politician, by the way, whenever we go in the country, people here and say, Professor Ndobesha is in this country. Can you come and make a presentation to our people? Can you meet the Ugandans who are there? Can you meet people who believe in human rights defending? We normally meet people wherever we are, even without appointment. So are you saying, assuming today I was in London, and some people have said, please, can you come and meet us? I shouldn't go there. So because you see people are looking at just at the arrest of Besigye, banging him in the current producing him. But it's an affront on the freedom of association, freedom of speech and expression. You understand? Like when people have come here, do interviews. Some whites, they come here when they work for Senate, then they come and say, I want to do an interview with you. You understand? And they ask on a number of issues, you give the interview and then they move. So human rights are not partisan. That the actions of the government against the opposition people whom they pick from foreign countries to come and bring them here and charge them in our court without following the procedure. Because under the law, they ought to have filed an application to extradite Dr. Kizza Besigye. And there would be grounds and they would be argued in that jurisdiction. And Dr. Besigye would have a right to representation in that country. Then they would prove that actually they found, because Dr. Besigye is not above the law in Kenya. It is an offense even to have the pistol in Kenya when you are not licensed. So the question is, why did they charge him in Kenya?
Thank you, Honorable Mwira. I'll return back to you. Doctor, you are a researcher and a political economist. What is your perspective and reading of this incident? Does it have any real solid implications for our country's political economy?
Well, thank you for this opportunity to be able to contribute my thoughts to a subject as serious as this one. The Honorable Mwira has outlined a number of issues, particularly the legal implications, and then a couple of thoughts around, the principles of international relations and collaborations. And there are views that I really would associate with. But having said that, for me, what I find very interesting, and maybe not running the risk of posing my own question, but a question that I think we as Ugandans should concern ourselves more with is really the question of freedoms vis the rule of law. I do not even want to tie myself to this incident of Dr. Besigye, but it is a good trigger, it's a good precursor. But if you look around, like Honorable Mwira says, there are a number of activities going around us that are a huge concern to the issue of good governance. And I would like to put a context to it and probably demonstrate what Mwira calls an affront to constitutionalism and rule of law. Many may not remember. Professor Ndewesa, being a historian, probably knows this better than many of us do. The role of memory in governance. Look at our constitution and the way it is situated. The essence of our being as Ugandan is evoked in the preamble, which is seen as the spirit of that constitution. And without trying to memorize or paraphrase it, but in a nutshell, it goes into what you'd call a retrospect. It starts by saying, look, this is where we were. and explains what it was, and goes on to put a context to it, the context of that time, and then it makes a pledge. And I think that's where the fundamentals of that holy grail that we call the Ugandan Constitution of 1995 are tied around. But has it lived to what it has promised? Of course, that is a question which is neither here nor there and can be very broad. But if you were to recount this incident and others, I would find a base year, like I would take the year 2003. In 2003, we set out the Commission of Inquiry into the reforms in the Constitution, which was led by Professor Sempebwa. And something very interesting happened that probably many Ugandans have forgotten about. But I find it a very telling incident. Remember, the way that process was structured was that the Sempebwa Commission was actually a commission selected by the Minister of Justice. And of course, with a both broad and limited terms of reference. And when they started their work, as they went around consulting, the cabinet, or members of cabinet, gained some information, and which sent some panic. Around that same time, remember, we still had what the courts in Uganda actually pronounced as a one-party state then, what we're calling the movement system. And in a ruling, even declared it an imposed illegal system and outlawed it in that ruling of the application of Zakolum and Winnie Byanyima Reagan. So these are precedents that we need to look into, and I'm purposefully going into this because you asked me about Uganda's political economy. You cannot, political economy is not just economics. You need to look at it in the context of governance, you know, the give and takes. So around that same time, NEC meets, and the other executive council also meets. When they do, what they actually decide is that they come up with some views. And for me, I look at it at that is where the architect began. They come up with some thoughts, pass it to cabinet, and cabinet, which is very unusual in any constitutional making process or due legal process, cabinet decides to approach the Sempebwa Commission with the view that they also have thoughts they want to give to the commission. Of course, there was a controversy around it, but at the end of the day, what is key here is the intention. What was their intention? Because remember, the Minister of Justice has appointed this commission. This report and recommendations are going back to the same cabinet for discussion. So this cabinet is now saying we
Want to
have
make an
views,
input.
we want to give our views. So you can clearly see that there was already an attempt to compromise the thoughts that were coming. There's something they wanted to preempt. In a nutshell, what am I trying to say? What I'm trying to say is that the architect, the attitude to move away from the spirit of democracy, good governance, and benevolence on the part of the government or the NRM led government started as way back as that. You know, the other thing which is crucial that many people could have forgotten about, and I would like to remind Ugandans, is that that Sempebwa report, first of all, Sempebwa accepted. He accepted cabinet to give their views, and they did. When the report was being launched, I'm sure Mwiro knows this very well, that there were two other minor reports that were written. Those reports were shrouded in controversy and hardly saw the light of day. The day this report was handed over to government, the media was not called for such a serious matter.
The main report?
Yes. The media was not invited. So that means, for lack of a better word, they chose to discuss this matter in the shadow of darkness. Now, 2003 to date, we have had one issue after another. One issue after another. It leaves me, when I take a long view, it leaves me with two dimensions in my thought. One, I would want to ask, what is the attitude of those in government towards a democratic state? Are we actually working towards building a democratic state? I would say no, or largely no, because these events clearly show that whereas government has sections, it's sections of people that are showing interest, or showed interest, like in this case, in the constitutional reforms. Because remember that constitutional reform came with the introduction of, multipartyism, and there was also controversy around that. Remember the minority report of Bidandi Sali, which everybody thought was going to throw Bidandi Sali into trouble. At the end of the day, the president actually backs Bidandi Sali. And on and on. So when you ask me today, what effect does this have? I will tell you the attitude towards an actual instance to grow governance, or good governance as we speak it, an attitude to freedoms, and an attitude, to guarantee a rule of law on the part of government, I think, is very low. So when you see incidents like this, it shouldn't surprise anybody. Even the legal stance of saying, government had an option to apply for extradition. All these are principles of law that only come up when normal processes have been deployed. Because anyway, instead of going to pick him up, if government or the government lawyers were sure that there was a prima facie case against him, they could have as well gone to court even without him here. Because Besigye had not run away, at least from the stories we are getting. He had gone to visit. Nobody has yet come out to say the man had run. So which means that certainly we were expecting him back. So I don't see the urgency in this kind of action. This kind of action can only be explained against the background that I've been trying to give. That the 3 or 4 fundamentals or ingredients of democracy, good governance, have been a process. There has been an architect to diminish that space. And there's collaborative evidence to it. Look at, say, for instance, freedoms of the media. They are global ratings from, in the last, I think, 6 years or so, we have progressively, at some point, out of Amnesty International and the other agency called the PEN, which is an international media watch, have been doing surveys for the last almost 10 years. At some point, I think by 2006, 2008, Uganda had progressed out of 187 countries that are polled. At some point, we came to a very comfortable position of number 52.
Which year is that?
I think 2008. 2728. Right now, after 2012 to date, I think now we have the unenvious number of either 150, 142. Yeah, but we are past 130. I may not have the figure right, but at least, but I can qualitatively tell you that there is a very declined space. We have had all these cases of atrocities against the media and media persons. Even the Human Rights Commission of Uganda, which is an agency, created by government, has given awards, to journalists, confirming brutality of the state. The question of whether these compensations, the compliances are ever made or is another matter. So, in a nutshell,
yes,
there are 3 things I want to tell you. That our economy, in terms of trade, international trade, is not sitting well. You know what our balance of payment sheet looks like at the moment. We are at the brink of overrunning our debt portfolio, which in simple terms means we are largely borrowing, and very soon we may not be able to borrow because we have become bad debtors. If you scrutinize our economic sheet as a country, almost 2 of every $3 we earn, we are using it to pay debt. So the question would be, how then do we manage our core services? No wonder it's not a surprise. Look at the state of health, look at the state of education, look at roads transport, look at domestic revenues, because transport communication is very key to facilitate trade. But if those are struggling, then that tells you the level of trade. Then the other only option we have for growth or economic growth or socioeconomic growth would be to attract foreign direct investment. But foreign direct investment, especially premium, what you call premium investment, you cannot have it in such a contested political atmosphere, because the big and impactful investors are very, very, very keen about political security in these countries. With this kind of billing, I am not sure. I think the kind of people we are attracting here as investors, I don't want to call them names, but I don't think they are the kind of people that can turn around our economy. Remember, we have the bulge, the youth bulge, and the challenges of unemployment, the quality of education. So our balance sheet is one that is drawn in the negative on our currency, and probably is doing better. So issues like this Besigye arrest only augur so badly for democracy and international trade.
Thank you, Doctor, for sharing your perspective with us on the program. Professor, this incident has generated a lot of condemnation from both domestic, regional, but also international actors. Quite surprisingly, even the Human Rights Commission of Uganda released a statement condemning Dr. Besigye's abduction in Nairobi. But the question I want to ask is, should this trigger a sense of foreboding for political actors, since historically Kenya specifically has been some sort of sanctuary for political dissenters who consider it as a space to seek refuge and then continue on with their cause, political mobilization, and so on and so forth. What could possibly now happen as between the relations between Uganda and Kenya in view of this incident?
Thank you for that question, and thanks for the views from my colleagues, especially giving the legal position. Most of them are lawyers. I want to first of all begin by asking you and the viewers to allow me use the concept of political myth. Political myth. I think we have got a political myth in Uganda today, and even in the past, that we have a democracy. That's a myth. Or that we have constitutionalism and the constitution. I think that's a myth. That's a political myth.
You're puncturing it.
And even going further to say that we have got liberal democracy and a liberal parliament, that's also a political myth. And we are trying to organize a society in post-colonial Uganda. We are organizing democracy and the state around political myth. I don't know how far we are going to go if we set out to organize society and politics around the political myth. You see, we have a political myth that, and the constitutional myth, that we have the rule of law. We have constitutionalism and the rule of law. And this is even, I think, augmented by the East African Treaty, East African Community Treaty, because it also says member states shall observe the rule of law. So the rule of law clearly states in our constitution, I imagine the constitution of Kenya, the Treaty of East African Community, and international treaties, which we are a signatory to, that there are certain procedures. Here we are not talking about whether Besigye committed an offense or he didn't commit an offense. But even if you commit an offense, there must be rule of law, which implies following procedures. So where the extradition procedures followed, because Uganda could have asked Kenya to pass through certain extradition procedures, and they would be observed, and Besigye and company would be brought back. But because we are living under political myth that we have the rule of law and constitutionalism and the democracy. Here we have Besigye tried in Uganda instead of being tried in Kenya. But when it comes to Kenya, also another, when it comes to Uganda and Besigye in the military court martial, that's also another political and legal myth and constitutional myth. Because I thought that the constitutional court actually pronounced itself here that civilians should be tried in civilian courts of law, not military court martial. The court martial is supposed to be an operational court for the military, not for such a cases.
A tribunal, actually, that's the word they use, the terminology, yes.
But how here we are, he is tried there. Another legal myth or judicial myth. And this case, by the way, might end up in the East African Court of Justice, I imagine. Because the parties concerned can take it up to the East African Court of Justice for interpretation. And this will bring in a wider perspective. But we also have the myth of democracy. I think the political myth we have here is that we are running a liberal democracy under a liberal constitution. It is not true. I think what we have here is akin or nearer to people's democracies. You know, there is liberal democracy and people's democracies. Liberal democracy are these democracies run around the Western democratic and governance systems, separation of powers, the rule of law, the Bill of Rights, the human rights. But under people's democracy that you would have, like say in China, under people's democratic communist part of China, or Cuba, or Laos, or Vietnam, I think those are the professed socialist countries. They say they have a democracy, but it is a people's democracy. The likes of Gaddafi's Jamahiriya. Under people's democracy, the number one, the president or the head of state, maybe through his party or even not without his party, is supposed to govern the population on behalf and in the interest of the population. To the extent that under those people's democracies, the head of state or the executive is supposed to protect the people, the citizens, against the middle class, the bourgeoisie. And you have had President Museveni quite often, who is akin to those people's democracies, saying these MPs, he was an MP, or he's still an MP, once honorable, you're honorable. These are parasites. And he's not referring to only opposition members of parliament. He's referring to the whole parliament as parasites. So you have parasites, and definitely as head of state, he's protecting the citizens, the people, from parasites. So if President Museveni says that under this myth I'm talking about, Honorable Mwiri is from Busoga region. I think President Museveni, one time as a candidate when he was in the Busoga region, he guided the supporters that you give me the MPs who can sleep.
It was in my election.
You can give.
They give him the other no sleeps. No, they wake him up. Hello, put up your hand
and vote according. That's how he guided. What is the implication there? The implication there is that Parliament here in Uganda is a myth. It is a political myth. They are just there to justify and legitimize the constitution. But otherwise, your topic is about parliamentary sovereignty. Yes. So what sovereignty does a parliament have if the parliament is viewed around that myth, that political norm, that it is a parliament of people who can be woken up to vote our position as executive. So that's the myth I'm talking about. And the rule of law in Kenya is also a myth, because how did they allow this extradition to this abduction to take place? Now, abduction is definitely against the law, both the constitution and the ordinary laws of Uganda and Kenya, and even the East African Community Treaty. And so these countries are practicing political myth that they are under the rule of law. And we are hereby challenging even the East African community. I think the East African community should take an initiative. The Human Rights Commission here, if it's not a myth also, rather than making that statement, it can, I think it is mandated to take initiative. They can take the initiative to start now in investigating the whole process. I think even the courts of Uganda could jump in and say, no, but this is a case of abduction. And therefore, we have to get out of the shadow of the political myth and the democracy myth and the constitutional myth. So your question was about how does this action affect the East African community. First of all, the East African community, if it's also not under an integration myth, it is an integration. I will use this concept to explain myself today. The East African community is also another myth. More than 12 years ago, when even Chiraso was still the Deputy Secretary General of East African Community, the Secretariat, which is the arm of the
administrative arm,
the civil service arm, they made a draft protocol for good governance, where all these things we are talking about would be. But the Council of Ministers plus the summit, who are supposed to push it to the EALA, to the legislative arm, to be passed into a protocol, have refused deliberately to put it there. That protocol, the good governance protocol, would be the one now that would give powers to the East African Court of Justice to make a ruling on such a cases like this one. But it was ignored. That protocol would also help us in the East African community to have the norms and the law, that the protocol now, that would bring about uniformity, if you want, or shared good governance principles and good governance laws as interpreted by the East African Court of Justice. That one was deliberately ignored. And so, this incident has actually created a hole, pricked a hole within the myth that we have got East African integration under the principle of rule of law, because the East African Court of Justice, the East African Treaty commands us or enjoins us, the lawyers will use such a language, to follow the rule of law. And here the rule of law says that for anybody who has committed a crime in a different country should be tried in that country, or if he has to be brought to his home country, certain rule of law procedures should be followed. In this case, extradition processes. But they are not followed, and the East African community is keeping quiet. The government of Kenya is giving it a nod. The government of Uganda is not bothered. The Parliament of Uganda is not bothered. The other institutions of the rule of law and order are not bothered. So the whole thing brings us to a myth. So if we live under political myth and the constitutional myth and the integration myth, then we are not building societies for the future. Why Africa has lagged behind other continents is partly because we are living under a myth. You see, when you live under a myth, something that is not believable, that's not rational, then you know you are not building a society in the right procedures and property and properly. When you consider South Korea, which was almost at the same level of development with us at independence, currently now they are talking about a GDP of almost 2 trillion US dollars, and we are at what? At 40?
48.
Billion. The other ones are talking of trillion. The per capita income of Uganda is around 1,000 US dollars. The one of South Korea is 20,000. Why? The Southeast Asian countries are making it because they are not living under a myth. They are not living under a state myth, a political myth, a constitutional myth, a rule of law myth. They have taken the bull by its horns, and they have discovered that they have decided to have institutions for state building, and institutions for managing society, and institutions for managing the economy. Here, we are living under political myth, legal myth, constitutional myth, parliamentary myth. So a society that has decided to live under the shadow of a myth has no future, in my opinion. And the example of the extradition of Besigye to Uganda, abduction to Uganda, and creating this insecurity in the political atmosphere. You know, there is also a pattern and trend in Uganda that when we are going for elections, there is a sense of manufacturing fear and manipulating fear. And this ends up taking us into the continuous cycle of this political myth, electoral myth, constitutional myth, democratic myth, parliamentary myth, and a society built on a myth has no future.
Thank you, Professor, for that interesting perspective regarding mythology and politics. Focus on Parliament now takes a short break. Do stay with us. We'll see you back shortly.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media, or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Welcome back. You are watching Focus on Parliament on Civic Space TV. In this segment, we continue interrogating the incident in Kenya where the veteran Ugandan opposition leader, Dr. Kizza Besigye, was abducted in the Kenyan capital of Nairobi and hastily repatriated back to Uganda, where he was arraigned before the court-martial. On today's edition of Focus on Parliament, we examine the critical role of Parliament in the protection of our country's territorial integrity and sovereignty. We are now joined by the Honorable Salam Musumba, who is a veteran opposition leader and a former legislator. Honorable, this week, before Parliament, there has been a discussion on this incident, and the Speaker of Parliament has directed that come next Tuesday, there should be a report by the Security Minister on the circumstances surrounding this incident. What is your perspective as a leader of the FDC and the PFF?
Yes, thank you very much. What you have called repatriation in the introduction sounds to me like repatriating a dead body. That is not the right what to say in these circumstances. It's the abduction of a political leader, and one who warned us long ago in 1999 that something had gone badly wrong with this establishment, with this leadership of the country. And so we continue, and he continues to expose that loss of way, that loss of direction of an entire nation. I'd like to take it from the perspective of exposing the decadence in the region, first of all, the surrounding military groups in the region, including M23, and the failure of governance of all these fellows within the region. Kenya has met the biggest case of loss of territorial sovereignty. And I think they should be the leaders in this because it's under their watch that all these abuses are happening. And it's a shame to them all and individually that such heinous things happen and they endanger their entire economy, their entire political situation that they have fought for so long because of one man, Dr. Besigye, and another man, President Museveni. And so when you come to Uganda, Uganda is already a lost cause. There's nothing to write home about it. In a normal parliament, what should have happened is that at the opening of this session, with all the international discussion going on, the minister should not be prompted to make a statement. He should make it as a matter of course. Pick out the issues that talk about governance in the area and the integrity of the thing they call Pan-Africanism, the integrity of the thing they call East African community, they call it. Those two are at stake because as far as President Museveni and his lot care about, Pan-Africanism is about invading other territories. It's about looting other people's resources. It is about expansion of the Chwezi dynasty. That is what Pan-Africanism means to him and them. We have a different interpretation of what it means. But under that illusion and under that cover, we believe that, we think that we are seeing the same things, we are talking about the same things. No, you're talking about conquest. Conquest. And we have just conquered Kenya. The hustler nation is under our charge. East Congo is under our charge. South Sudan is under our charge. We call the shots in those areas. And so, the incident has only helped us to see firsthand what all the underhand machinations that have been going on, that now they're in global glare for all of us to see. Anybody who wants to miniaturize it and call it parliament is beyond parliament. It's beyond the prevailing institutions. Because even in the governance of this nation, parliament only rubber stamps at best, at worst it rubber stamps. Rubber stamp. So this parliament can only be useful in promoting this agenda of conquest, overtly and covertly. What Professor has just given us needs to be further and deeply understood. That is not just for nothing. It is for a bigger agenda. It is bigger than the parliament. It's bigger than the territory. It is bigger than Besigye. Besigye is just this one man that has allowed us an aperture in this plot for us to peep and see. And I'm glad we haven't missed that window, that opening. Yeah.
Thank you, Honorable, for your thoughts. Honorable Mwiru, how could this incident possibly impact on the impending 2026 general elections?
Well, for me, I don't want even to take it in that direction, because now you are making me focus on another myth of an election where General Museveni will manipulate and announce themselves. I think I would look at the election and the parliament together just as a governance tool left by the colonialist, which the agent of the neo-colonialist is using to actually to take around people in the games. For me, I would call upon the public to have a discussion on the governance structure we have, because you see, first, as Honorable Salam has said, you know that there's nothing you'll get from Parliament. Two, you're talking about those elections. It is just an opportunity for us, a platform, to speak to people and tell them that actually we're supposed to take this direction. So for us to use this as a precursor to 2026, to me it would be to miss a point, because we're talking about gross human rights violation. And for you are telling me about an election. You understand? I'm not even interested in 2026 in as long as this is taking place, because this happened in broad daylight, that we have the laws exist as they are. One player doesn't play by the law. In the previous 2021 election, I arrested the presidential candidate. You understand? And the incarcerated the presidential candidate has continued the campaigning. There were laws talking about COVID. He floated all the laws. Opening toilets, all you saw him all over, quitting platforms for speaking. Even as he's abducting citizens, he's busy campaigning under the narrative of PDM. You understand? So for me, I want the public to refocus on what went wrong and what is the sting without an antidote to correct all this. Because as long as we are playing in this game, that you are coming to participate in an election, now you want to even to us to shift focus from the gross human rights violations now to 2026.
It's agenda.
It's agenda. So for me, I don't want. I will call upon the public first to focus on these violations. Do the 37 or 27 FDC youth who are arrested in Kenya, do they have a right to be in Kenya? If the issue is, then we must first deal with that. Did Dr. Besigye have a right to be in Kenya? You understand? In case he had breached any law, does he have a right to be treated properly as per these treaties? The way what the law says. So I don't want to jump into a diversionary mode, because I've had even people trying to conjure silly narratives about how Besigye, one has been lost, is trying to do what. All that is just foolish. We just need to focus that a citizen has been arrested. He needs to regain his right. Then you can start your narratives thereafter. So for me, the focus should not be about 2026. The focus is the regain of the freedom. Actually, all in this struggle, we have been fighting for two things: ownership of this country and our freedom. You understand? Which we say, CF.
To be the citizen.
To be the citizen. The struggle is about that. Once we get back our country, then we shall have our freedom. But then you're asking me that now, how do we use this as a precursor to participating in the other election? Does it address...
It's dead on arrival.
Yes. Does it address what is an issue? What is an issue? The ownership of our country and our freedom. And as long as the situation is as is, because the 2026, Museveni will go there, will falsify results and will announce himself. There's a myth of court, is there, you'll go in that myth and you'll be defeated.
mythology.
Mythology. That's
Thank you, Honorable. Yes, Doctor. As a legal scholar, I want us to spotlight the question of the judicial processes and the institutions, because largely this is a political but also a legal question. The Constitutional Court has pronounced itself that civilians should not be the subject of trials under martial law or military courts. Here we have a situation of an abduction incident involving two countries, and when Dr. Besigye was spirited back to Uganda, he was arraigned before the military court martial, remanded to a civilian prison, but still the subject of martial law. So how does this play out? Because the Constitution provides under Article 126, our legal system spells out civilian courts. It makes no mention of the military court system, which we understand, according to the judgment of the Constitutional Court, that's a specific disciplinary tribunal for serving military officers. Why should we continue with this sort of system? Because it looks like it's persecution against the citizen.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the pertinent issue you've raised, and in the same breadth that the Honorable Moiro has taken, I think I would like to also take the same kind of detour. I think the central question here is the question of civic activism. You know, we need to impress upon the Ugandan citizen to rise up to the occasion. You know, we really risk getting into what you'd call, you know, academic, I don't want to call it, I don't want to call them contestations, but academic exercise. Or gymnastics. Yes, you know, the question you raised would make a good choice for a thesis in public interest litigation. But judiciously, one thing we need to do, and probably let me first call upon the civic section, the legal section of our community, that the processes are available. Court pronounced itself, and I think we as lawyers and all the other legal practitioners, including those on the bench, because our constitution even allows for judicial activism, I think there is need for us to embody ourselves to the bigger body we call Uganda or Ugandans. The lawyers can go back to court. You know, there was a pronouncement, we have continued to see fluctuations. If we cannot find process and remedy within the local courts, there are regional courts like Professor mentioned, the East Africa Court of Justice. We can go to the Africa Court of Justice, because I think what we should not tire from, and this is really what democracy is about, or what governance or rule of law, is that there are two sides to the scale. You have those who supply and those who demand. And I think our roles as citizens is clear. We have no choice to determine what we are being supplied. As we can see, if it was a basket of mangoes, we have been given a basket with a lot of mangoes that are
Rotten.
or spotted and rotten and
Uneatable.
yes, and it's our choice to pick. And for me, my heart cries out for the young Ugandans. You see, the demography we have is really a risk demography. You get 85% under 25 years. And to borrow to professors the concept of myth and mythology, you can't go through that kind of myth with such a huge and young population. I think Ugandans, and these are the young Ugandans we're talking about, I think we need to get out and take the bull by the horn. We need to demand. We should not tire. So like you said, we have seen there is a deliberate process on affront of the law. There is a process of unattainable political practice. I gave you an elaborate, anchoring and thinking of where I think the Constitution started to be tampered with. There is also the other danger in this country that I think many of our youth have been ushered into, what you would call, they're not into the concept of participating in the building of a society, like Professor says it. We have a youth that is living in false arrivalism. We have a youth that see their images on the TV, on the cover magazine, because all they are told about is the success story, and which is the sort of, imbued and then catapulted in the so-called historic story of, the NRM, and which just comes and stops around 1985. But Uganda comes beyond this. How many young people, for instance, know the efforts towards the fight to democracy by legends like Musazi, and his cohort? It started, how about our traditional chiefs?
Yes.
The resistance of the white in Busoga, in Bunyoro, in Acholi in Lamogi.
Yeah.
So, as elites,
To preserve our integrity.
yes, so we need to move. We need to get the context of this country right. And I think that is the first step. After we have got that, then we need to increase civicness. So spaces like this, we are living in an information age. And I think we, especially the intelligentsia, are the biggest enemies to this country. Because, you see, you cannot give what you don't have. You look at the media content, because these children or the youth can only read what is available. They can only watch what is available. You go to our theaters, the theaters are dead. You would go to National Theatre those days and see a play of Shakespeare or Othello. They buried Father Grimes the other day. These are legends. These are concepts that shape society. Today, what are we left with? Everybody is just being told, we are going to use science to turn around this country. We have increased the school fees. We have increased the wage bill of a science teacher.
Actually, we have looked at the law says that when a constitutional petition is before a constitutional court, it must put away every business. And appeals in the Supreme Court to determine whether you can try a citizen, the court martial or not. It is lying there. And we need to see action.
So for me, the very last thing I want to say is that the only opportunity we have is in dialogue. We should not tire to talk. We should not tire to demand. And we need to mobilize broader constituencies and around facts. And maybe if we throw it back to the people, we then can begin to have a constructive conversation. Otherwise, where we are, it's a catch-21.
Professor, Dr. Paints it as a conundrum for the country, a very grim picture. What are your thoughts? Is there hope for Uganda, politically speaking?
Uganda and the whole of Africa, we are in the same boat. I think this week or last week, I watched a video clip of some young person in Nigeria, which clearly captures this myth we are living in. He was referring to the myth of service delivery, the myth of justice, getting justice in courts of law, and the myth of getting salvation from the church. The young man did say, I think maybe he was Nigeria, Uganda, whatever. He was in West Africa there. He was pointing out this one graphically and said that in this country of ours, if you want to die, you go to the hospital. And if you want to find sinners, you go to the church. And if you want corruption and injustice, you go to the courts of law. So he was capturing this myth in which we are living in. So you are alone in your as CCG in your theme for today. You are talking about parliamentary integrity. Integrity can be defined in two ways. One, it is the integrity referring to ethics and morals. But another one, it refers to independence and autonomy of a person or a country or an institution. It is in those two ways. So I think Parliament should be a place of our representatives who are honorable and therefore where we expect decorum. But it is a myth. You know what happens in our Parliament. You see the way they exchange views, the way they fight each other, the language that they use to each other. That is a myth. But even in protecting the integrity in terms of the independence of Uganda, it is also a myth. We are a neo-colony, and Parliament cannot give what they don't have. There is this common saying that you can't give what you don't have. So if Parliament is not sovereign, it has no supremacy, it has no independence from the executive, how could it give it to Uganda? It can't. You can't give what you can't, you yourself don't have, and you have not fought for it. Because this business of merely the speaker saying, oh, let us get a report from Minister so and so. I mean, Parliament can make a resolution. Parliament is not only about reacting to the bills from government and passing them, but it can make resolutions which are binding if they had parliamentary autonomy. But now, they are a myth. There is parliamentary myth, parliamentary sovereignty myth. So how do you give sovereignty to Uganda when you cannot give it to yourself? It doesn't work that way. We actually put it better. I wish I was speaking in Runyankore. There is a proverb or a saying which goes like this. Koza kushaba amashita hanjiri orahampunuto wanzo kajirebaho ukagajirebaho before you ask for ghee from a warthog or a pig, you must first see it on it. You must see the ghee on it. But if it is not there, how do you begin saying, oh, you warthog, please give me ghee? No, it doesn't have it. So how do we demand for parliamentary sovereignty from a parliament that has no sovereignty? Because they would fight for our sovereignty. Now we are going to the East African court, East African Yara. Yara has no sovereignty. You know, I went to Arusha. I used to go to Arusha because I belonged to an organization promoting East African integration. You know, when the East African community broke up, the building, the structure itself for East African community, when they were dividing the assets, Tanzania took it. So the new building where the East African community is housed has been built by aid from Germany. So how can an institution supposed to create the East African sovereignty in terms of negotiating with the global powers have its headquarters built by the Germans, by the foreigners? The AU headquarters was also constructed by aid, I think, from China. Our ministry here of foreign affairs, I think, was also constructed by aid from China or something like that. So how do we claim this space of sovereignty and integrity when we are typical neo-colonies? I know Uganda is trying to get out of the colonial armpit of the Western world. There is now a move to the east. Move to the east now
To another one.
to go to to the armpit of the Chinese and the Russians. I mean, is that also getting sovereignty? So
It's called independence.
so it's another independence myth that we are going to the east to get independence. No, getting independence is having your own territorial integrity. So Parliament of Uganda cannot create integrity for Uganda, and Parliament in Kenya may not do the same, because, and the IARA may not do the same, because they don't have that integrity, both in the definition of ethics, and morality, and in the other interpretation of having autonomy and independence and guarding it jealously. So my advice to citizens of Uganda is that we, as my colleague pointed out, we must own this country and we must own this independence. The independence we got, as Mamdan puts it, is state independence, not citizens' independence. And we need to clear this myth, get out of this myth that we have independence, that we have democracy, that we have parliamentary democracy, that we have rule of law, that we have participation, that we don't have participation in our governance, which is a principle of constitutionalism. What is happening? We are being participated instead of participating. Kushirikishwa, I think they say it in Kiswahili. We are being participated instead of participating. So it is better we come up as citizens and start participating in our governance rather than being participated.
Thank you, Professor, for your perspective. Food for thought for the citizenry watching. Honorable, as we conclude, we have witnessed a protest action this week by opposition members denouncing the abduction of Dr. Besigye. We also learned from media reports that the Honorable Martha Karua, the former Justice Minister of Kenya, will be joining the legal team as a lead counsel for Dr. Besigye. What can you tell the public in what we should expect going forward?
What we are doing is really to activate that civic capacity that has been discussed ably by the two land fellows, doctor and professor. And so it is, if you are driving a car, it's to engage another gear that binds us as Kenya and Uganda, people that are seeking for independence, sovereignty, rule of law. It is to activate that. And the beauty of it is that this arrest of Dr. Besigye is giving us the space to do so. And so let us give it every support we need as the trigger we need for civic action across the borders, for Kenya and Uganda to start with, and that should then invite Tanzania into the fold to understand, are we as a people of the original East Africa, are we mapping out our future correctly? Do we have the right people? Do we have the right tools? Do we have the right conceptual framework, as has been ably discussed? And then we, the so-called elites, do we have what it takes to move this region forward and to move this country forward? I like what Dr. here says, that we are largely an empty space. We are a bubble, talking and talking big concepts which we need to put into action, because we are endangered as a region and as peoples in this region. And so, yes, Martha Karua will lead the team, and yes, more civic action, collective civic action, not party-based political action, is required, and it will happen. Yeah.
Many thanks indeed. Honorable, your closing remarks on the program.
Well, for me, I'm looking forward to seeing all citizens, all players in this country marching to the office of the Chief Justice, demanding for the judgment in Honorable Michael Kavaziguruka's case, where the Constitutional Court ruled that you cannot try citizens in military courts. We are coming to almost now 4 years. The Chief Justice is sleeping on job, in my view.
Snoring, actually. Snoring, not sleeping. It's past sleep.
Actually, that would resolve that issue as to whether you would try a civilian in a military court. Because actually, from the look of things, it's like he's unbothered. People have written letters reminding them of that, and I think we need to coordinate an action to that.
He's off duty.
Yeah.
It's a challenge for our times, but thanks, Honorable, for sharing your views with us. Yes, Doctor, your closing remarks.
Yeah, very well. Again, for me, my focus is really the youth, who are majority of our population, and civicness. Look at, say, for instance, the students who are in university studying law. These are things they should get interested in, because you're busy learning concepts, but the space where you expected to go and practice this law is getting shrunk. So, again, a myth. So how do you comfortably sit at that university saying, I am looking towards becoming an attorney, and yet, it's just like trying to make your hole, and you're not sure where this garden to dig is. So as a child of your father or your mother, you should then be thinking about, okay, this is my mother's piece of land. Let's see how we can preserve it so that I'm able to, she's used it, I'll be able to use it, and then also to pass it. So the governance health of this country is a concern for all of us, and we all need to wake up. And then the bodies we have charged, Parliament, the Legal Committee on Parliament, the Uganda Law Society. If you say that, I have not seen the statement of the Uganda Human Rights Commission, but if they have, I think it is important that the rest of the bodies charged with judiciary, protection of good governance, should spring up to action. But also with finality. It is, and not only these, not only these professional bodies. We are getting information from all sorts of spectrums today. I really want to see that even the content that our young people are receiving, both in terms of, television, radio programming, is it building anybody? We're listening to Celine Dion the whole day, and I'm a little old school. That's the musician I know. But I know today they're listening to some people. But is that nation building? These are the questions we should be asking. Yeah? UCC, they're powering licenses for radio. Are they monitoring? Yeah. What are these radios churning out? So we are simply turning out cabbages in this country, and yet we expect tomatoes tomorrow. You cannot get it.
No, it doesn't happen.
Thank you, Doctor, for your insights on the program. Prof, your closing remarks.
My closing remarks is that the abduction of Besigye and the company back to Uganda makes me dense. I think I'm dense. This thing makes me dense. Not long ago, General Kale Kayihura was arrested and charged in the court martial for abducting Rwandans from Uganda and taking them
back to Rwanda
without passing through the right procedures. And therefore he committed a crime and was arraigned at the court martial. Now, the same thing of abducting Besigye from Kenya to Uganda is similar to Kayihura being arraigned to the court martial for abducting Rwandans and taking them back to Rwanda. Then If that doesn't make me dense, what is it? I don't understand this political myth and the fog and gymnastics. It really baffles my mind, and I feel like I am dense. Because the same crime for which Kayihura was taken to court martial is the same crime that these people went to Kenya and brought Besigye. Therefore, if we were to use the same yardstick and not live in political hypocrisy and myth, then those people who brought Besigye from Nairobi to Kampala should now go to the court martial before Besigye. If we use the precedence of Kayihura, these are lawyers, they will tell you the law of precedence, the common law. So the law of precedence would be that now those people who brought Besigye should be marching in the court martial for having broken the Ugandan and Kenyan laws. But I am dense. I don't understand. I don't look at. I am trying to follow the logic, and I'm getting lost. That is my conclusion.
Thank you, Professor, for sharing your perspective on the program with us. Once again, let me appreciate you, my panelists, Honorable Musumba, Honorable Mwilu, Dr. Tolit, and Professor Ndebesa, for your able participation on the program and for those excellent reflections respecting today's topic. To our esteemed viewers, we appreciate you for watching and keeping us company from the start of this program up to its conclusion. Many thanks to the production unit for keeping us live on air. Our dear viewers, please engage us on our various social media platforms. We are on X, we are on Facebook. You can watch this program and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. We'll see you next time. Be blessed.